Welcome. In front of me is a Poco F7 Pro, and today I'll be going over unboxing along with a quick look at the device and also its specifications. So, let's just get straight into this. So this is one of the more premium devices that Poco offers. I think actually the most premium that they offer us so far. From like previous generations. In terms of this generation, there is also an ultra version of this phone. But anyway, getting in there, we get the phone. Some information. So flagship Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 processor. Now, this is a great processor, but flagship would have a 8 Elite, I would say, not a Gen 3. Gen 3 was a previous generation one. So it would be fine if this was released last year. It seems more misleading saying that this is like a flagship in 2025, where 8 Elite is the flagship now. Anyway, so let's boot it up. Oh, there we go. So here we just have some like moisture absorbing things, and then in here we have our charging cable. So that's a type C to type A. Instruction and a case that comes provided with a device. So the case is the matte, kind of grayish, almost black kind of case, which I personally like. Silicone ones get kind of nasty yellowish. These ones don't tend to do that. Now, when it comes down to the phone itself, it has a pretty decent design. The frame right here feels nice in the hand. It's very similar to what Samsung has, just to kind of showcase this. So you can see it's very similar. Samsung is a little bit sharper in terms of the finish, but all in all, it does feel pretty nice. Now, when it comes to the display, because that's what you're going to be looking at for the most part anyway, we have a 6.67-inch display with a resolution of 1440 by 3200 pixels. It is an AMOLED display, 120 Hz refresh rate, Dolby Vision support, HDR10 Plus certified, and peak brightness of 3200 nits. It also boasts a 526 pixels per inch, which is a pretty sharp display, sharper than most phones, with a screen-to-body ratio of 89.3%, covered with a Cornell Gorilla Glass 7i. So the display right here is top notch. Now if we flip it over to the cameras, we have what looks to be a dual camera setup, and the main sensor is a 50 megapixel f1.6 aperture 24mm wide sensor, and then 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide. Now the cameras right here are more in line with something that you'd find on a mid-range device rather than a flagship one. So this is a little bit of a more disappointing part of the phone. Now, taking a quick look, the Ultra version of this phone has dual 50 wide and telephoto and a 32 megapixel ultra wide. So it does make up the lacking cameras of this specific one. Now, personally, I feel like skimping out this much on cameras on a Pro model, and then adding like significant bump in camera hardware on the Ultra just seems like a kind of odd choice. So like I said, this seems like a mid-range device, while the Ultra actually seems like the designated flagship. And I'm pointing that out because, for instance, most companies tend to do more gradual improvements. So again, bringing back the Samsung. So here we have, what was it, like dual 50 megapixels, I think. So this is the box standard S25. Then the S25 Plus had the same cameras, and the Ultra had additional cameras and improved on one of the lenses. Here you just have like the 50 megapixel wide one, and then some crappy ultra wide, while the ultra gets a 50 megapixel ultra wide. So, sorry, no, 32 megapixel, and it gets a periscope 50. So it seems like a massive jump in cameras from Pro to Ultra, while the phones this one is just one tier lower. Now, as a selfie, we have a 20 megapixel wide sensor right here. And with the back cameras, you can record videos at 8K up to 24 frames, and 4K gets you 60, 1080p also 60 with slow motion up to 960 frames. And 720p gets you slow motion of 1920 frames per second. So, moving on into the internals now. The device comes with a whopping 6,000 mAh battery, using most certainly, without even needing to check, the silicon carbon battery, as it is a 6,000 milliamps in a relatively thin device. It also charges at 90 watts, so very fast. There is no wireless charging, unfortunately. It's being powered by a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, comes with 12 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of built-in storage, with the second option being 512 gigabytes of storage. Well, both options offering 12 gigs of RAM and UFS 4.1 storage type, with no expandable storage. And honestly, that basically sums up the device. It is a weird, I would say, kind of device, as it has a pretty good processor in here. The price is at nearly $600 US, so it's not in that region where I would say that it's, you know, super great priced, like fantastically priced, like some other versions of the Poco phones that they released previously. So this seems more premium, but then it's using a last generation processor, and the cameras right here seem way too skimped out compared to the Ultra to feel like a Pro model. That explains it. And I want to also point out that the Ultra version of this phone costs about 100 euros more. So it is going to be a bit more expensive, but you definitely get a better camera setup, and also the actual processor gets upgraded to the flagship grade, which is the 8 Elite. But you do have a smaller battery, faster charging, and wireless charging as well. So those are some like quick differences. All in all, it's a great phone. I would probably wait for it to be more on a little bit cheaper, for like 500, maybe even less, compared to the default 500 and about 80 euros that it's supposedly selling for. It just feels like it was designed to incentivize purchasing the higher end model. So for that, it just seems kind of weirdly priced, weirdly placed as well. So yeah. Anyway, one last thing that I want to mention is, which I didn't talk about, which is the Android running on here. And let's see if I can actually quickly find this. So we have Android 15 with HyperOS 2.0, with no mention of how many Android upgrades, but typically it's like 2 to 3 year support. So with no mention, that's what I would be expecting here. Now, that out of the way, hopefully you found this very helpful, and if you did, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.